readers, Leah Harlann here, and welcome back to my reading corner. This video is going to be a little different from my normal vlogs because this video is also an assignment. That's right, I'm actually submitting this video to one of my professors. I feel like this is going to be very cringe, but I decided to do this because the assignment was very open-ended in terms of the format and even the content, so I thought it would be a great way to share with all of you who are curious about my program. The prompt for this final project was to evaluate all of the content from the course and reflect on a topic pertaining to my future in library sciences. This class was one of the few required courses that serves as a foundation of knowledge on which to build everything we will learn in future classes. With a name like Information Science and Technology, you can imagine it attempts to cover quite a few learning objectives. Throughout the semester, we read and discussed many topics pertaining to information science. So the final project is kind of an extension of those prior discussions and reflections. I was asked to choose a topic that connects to the courses I may choose going forward, as well as the career path that I hope to walk in the future. It was a little difficult, but I finally settled on something that not only pertains to my future career aspirations, but is also a current issue that will not be going away anytime soon. If you look at the slide here, you can see the materials that I took into consideration when forming the topic that would become the focus of this project. So I went over all of our readings that we were assigned throughout the course, which were generally divided into 4 modules and then had subtopics for each week. The weeks also had questions that were meant to guide our reflections. There were in-class activities because we would have a class online in real time at the end of each module, so about once every 4 weeks. And during that class, we had an activity where we were broken into small groups and had to complete a certain set of tasks. Usually it was divided into 2 parts, covering the first half and the second half of the module. And then the final portion, which was sort of an overarching assignment that we had to work on throughout the semester, was a series of journal entry/reflections that we had to submit to the discussion boards that everybody could access and look at. The reflections were sort of meant to be very personal and tied into the readings and the lessons we were going through, and they all had to be a minimum length, but they also could be written in response to somebody else's submission to the discussion board. So ultimately, I ended up doing a combination of my own reflections as well as a couple of responses to other students. And that helped a lot because the 4th module was really the one that I was most interested in. It had a lot to do with information and society, which is, of course, very current and very relevant, especially for someone like me who hopes to work in public libraries in the future. So, the topic that I settled on is algorithms and AI in a new age of fake news. This topic is meaningful to me on a personal and a professional level. I have been very passionate about following news on technology as it hits the mainstream, how it is understood by the average person who may not be as tech savvy, the ways they can and are misused by bad faith players, and efforts by individuals and organizations to educate others on the potential dangers presented. In a time where the library is becoming one of the few remaining bastions of trustworthy and reliable information, librarians should be able to help their patrons learn how to critically evaluate what they see online to develop media literacy skills. But to do that, we must also continue the never-ending journey of keeping abreast of the ever-changing digital literacy landscape. So, I will go over a sort of table of contents that will break down for you this probably very long video so that you can get an idea of where we're going with this, a sort of outline, if you will. The first part is just going to be some basic definitions, a sort of introduction to fake news, and the second part will go into some of the technology that has come up recently and how it is affecting the way we see and perceive information online. The third part covers the problem or problems that we are facing in the wake of all of this technology and how it is being used in rather harmful ways. And then the fourth and final part will be a solution or more suggestions for what we as individuals can do right now. So, what even is fake news? Early in the semester, we read a lot of material that helped us to understand and form definitions for broad terms that would be used throughout the course and even beyond. Things like information, knowledge, information science versus library science, etc. A couple of important ones were misinformation and disinformation. This was a very clear distinction that we made in our first in-class discussion activity. Because while both refer to false information, the motivation behind the dissemination of each is the way we are able to distinguish between the two. So, to be clear, misinformation is false information that is spread without regard for intent, whereas disinformation is false information that is spread in a deliberate attempt to deceive. Disinformation is the type more commonly associated with propaganda and political subversion. It is the news stories you see that blatantly accuse a political party or specific government official of foul play, and in the campaign speeches bashing opponents. But it is also the celebrity telling you that the skincare line they are selling will give you a complexion as radiant as theirs. I mean, we all know that that's impossible because it's not just a set of products that give famous people the kind of skin that they have. They have, they're able to afford excellent doctors and incredibly expensive skin treatments. They can have nutritionists on their payroll that help tailor their diet to make sure that, they are always incredibly healthy. They can afford all of those incredibly healthy foods. So, it's a lot more than just some lotion, some moisturizer, and a face scrub. But there are certain celebrities that will try to deceive the average person or consumer into believing that, you too can have skin like mine if you just buy my very, very expensive skincare products. So that is another form of disinformation. It's also the dramatic headlines that you see plastered on tabloids at the grocery store, and the viral video of a child that appeared to be kidnapped, but turned out was actually very highly doctored and edited to appear that way. All of these examples are motivated attempts to deceive the public for some kind of gain, be it political authority, money, or shifting public perceptions. So if we take a look here, we can find two examples that I think are a good way to distinguish between misinformation and disinformation. So one of these is a conspiracy theory that has kind of seen a resurgence amongst Gen Z as satire, just some sort of lighthearted humor. Whereas the other one is an idea that is being used as a rallying point to a certain political party, being used as a sort of signal that if you agree with this idea, then you are one of us and probably agree with a lot of our other ideas as well. I don't think I need to tell you which one is which. So now the term fake news. If we look at the phrase fake news, it has technically been in use since the late 19th century to refer to any false news story that was published in the papers. You can see a couple of examples on the left, such as actually when there was a radio program that was reading a fictional novel, many people actually misunderstood it as real news reporting and were driven to a bit of a panic. So that first example is actually an article debunking a fake news story. The second one is from one of those aforementioned tabloids that definitely look a little different today, but are perhaps originating from very similar places, because I think most of us can agree that it's rather absurd to think that Hillary Clinton adopted an alien baby. And even though that picture is labeled as an official photo, it's, it's fake. We know it's fake. Whereas examples on the right look a little bit different nowadays. So the more modern meaning, which has stronger associations with political slander and malicious journalism, came during the period leading up to the 2016 American presidential election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Hundreds of news websites began popping up and publishing blatantly fake stories that spread like wildfire on Facebook, with absurd headlines meant to grab your attention and capitalize on social media algorithms that rewarded engagement with the bogus articles. So you can see the upper right-hand image, which says fake news is a real problem. This is listing out some of those bogus articles that were being spread around during the election. And we're seeing that the top 5 fake election stories, the one with the most engagement by far, is titled Pope Francis Shocks World, Endorses Donald Trump for President, and Releases Statement. This may come as a shock to some of you, but Pope Francis did not, in fact, endorse Donald Trump for president. A couple other ones. WikiLeaks confirms Hillary sold weapons to ISIS, then drops another bombshell. Breaking news. It's over. Hillary's ISIS email just leaked, and it's worse than anyone could have imagined. I think a lot of you can see, especially those of you who do use the internet more, that these are following a format that we typically call clickbait. It's got a very shocking, scandalous statement, the Pope, ISIS, Hillary's emails, but then it follows up with a phrase that sort of begs you to click on the link to then visit the website to see the full story. So, releases statement, breaking news, it's worse than anyone could have. You understand where I'm going with this. So all of these sites, all of these fake websites, or all of these fake news story websites were traced back to Eastern Europe. And these websites were earning money from the dissemination of their stories thanks to the clicks and shares that put their stories and the advertising alongside them on the screens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. And in the height of irony, Hillary Clinton was actually the first person to use this newer fake news phrase with its more modern definition, even though it is most commonly associated with Trump thanks to his rampant use and claim of it following his shocking victory. While Clinton used the phrase to refer to the spreading of false propaganda in 2016, Trump and his cohort picked it up in January of 2017 and have applied the label liberally to every journalist or news story that they did not like or disagreed with. By transforming fake news into an accusation meant to discredit, the definition was broadened to the point of losing its meaning altogether. It used to mean obviously false information being spread in a news story, but now it was more of an accusation that the information in those news stories was made up, and specifically made up to target him and his allies. The mass media actually kind of fell for this tactic as well, and in their efforts to sort of counter the usage and appropriation of the term fake news, or to explain it better, or to even go along with this newer meaning, it added to the confusion and even hurt their own credibility in the process. So even though the phrase has trended downward since Trump left office, the fear and distrust of many news sources has lingered, with many people unsure of who can be believed or trusted to provide objective facts and reporting. Meanwhile, fake news in its original and more modern form continues to spread. So you can see, the last image I didn't point out was Donald Trump's tweet, which, as you can see, is fairly early on in 2017. This happens quite often around this time. He uses the phrase fake news in all caps to draw your eye and attention to it. And then he tags pretty much every major mainstream news outlet that isn't Fox News, trying to sow doubt amongst his supporters that, you can't trust these journalists because they don't like me and they're saying bad things about me. You can only trust the ones that are on my side, that are saying things that I agree with and that support me. So now we can move on to part 2. And this is where technology comes in. Yes, I will explain this line later, but yes, your favorite makeup brand may have accidentally outed you to the wrong people. So don't let all of my talk about elections and propaganda make you forget what I'm really getting at here. The issues are even bigger than American politics. Technology is a major part of the spread of misinformation, both above and below board, and it can cause exponentially more harm when appropriated for malicious purposes. From content algorithms and data brokers to facial recognition and deepfake videos, the dangers online are becoming harder to spot and doing more damage than ever to the lives and livelihoods of people everywhere. And none of us are immune to this. I'm sure that you, like myself and many others, believe we are smart enough to not fall for scams and fake news. I mean, none of us believed for a second that magazine article about Hillary Clinton and the alien baby was real, right? But according to a study published in Science, which is a magazine, in 2020, humans are actually spreading misinformation more than the truth. And they examined this in multiple ways. You can see, I pulled the sort of graphs that were made from this study, and you can see that the false news was spread farther, faster, deeper, and more broadly than the truth in the same situations. In fact, false news was 70% more likely to be retweeted than the truth. So to make this worse, this problem is actually going to be exacerbated in the near future by new and developing technologies that will make it even harder to differentiate between facts and falsehoods. Combine that with the increasing accessibility of said technology, and you can see the possibilities for misconduct. It can be scary to consider the chance that we have been manipulated without even realizing it. And this is where I have to reveal something rather disturbing. No one had to hack our phones or computers to get our personal data to use against us. We have given it away ourselves, usually without even realizing it. Sure, we may know that our phone was listening to our conversation about the weather, and that's why we're getting targeted ads for winter clothing. And liking that makeup tutorial resulted in our YouTube recommendations being overrun by more makeup tutorials. But what you might not have noticed is that all of those innocuous interactions have been compiled into a database that is able to discern deeper personal information at a frightening level of accuracy. All of those likes and shares and retweets and personality quizzes, while on their own seem like very disparate data points, when combined with millions of other data points from other users, can start to paint an interesting picture that with the right AI or algorithm can interpret that picture and get meaningful data out of it. So a famous example of this is Cambridge Analytica. Yes, that Cambridge Analytica, the company that joined Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign at the 11th hour and played a crucial role in helping him win the election. Their tactics were a departure from traditional methods, such as the ones that were being used by his opponents. Hillary Clinton was targeting demographics and worked with major companies like Google and big data analysts, while Cambridge Analytica targeted psychometric profiles. Now, these profiles were based on the Ocean personality model, built using an AI that analyzed big data to sort every user into a personality type. So you can see I do have a small infographic here on the left. It says up to 87 million Facebook users had their data exposed by Facebook. And this exposed raw data of millions of those 87 million profiles to Cambridge Analytica, who then collected that data along with data from plenty of other sources. Don't misunderstand. And then used all of that data when building these psychometric profiles and psychographs for the Trump campaign. Sorry, let me check my notes again and get water. Oh my goodness. It would be difficult to define exactly how much this contributed to Trump's victory, but a study that was done via tests at Stanford showed that a personality-targeted marketing style drew up to 63% more clicks and up to 1,400 more conversions in real advertising campaigns that were done on Facebook. And most of these algorithms and tools and machine learning models that we are hearing about were not created to do harm. Things like cryptocurrency and machine learning models, they are not created with the intent to do evil. And yet, we see lots of evidence to the contrary in our day-to-day lives. Michael Kosinski, who was the original creator of the machine learning model design that Cambridge Analytica used, was horrified to see his work misused on such a massive scale. And in fact, he was clued in rather early on when a representative from the company that founded Cambridge Analytica approached him about his model and wanted to see the data that they were using in it. And he refused because he saw the potential for harm, and he was suspicious about the fact that this representative was refusing to disclose a lot of information about, for example, what the company was going to use it for. And now he sees the results, and there are actually many people out there who blame him for what Cambridge Analytica did, even though he had no direct role in any of it. And that just goes to show that some people will always find a way to ruin this technology for the rest of us. All Michael Kosinski saw was a concept, a blueprint, if you will, a possibility. But it was Cambridge Analytica that spun it to the worst possible purpose. And, maybe some people want to believe, I see it a lot with current technologies that are picked up and praised, and so many people are so optimistic about the good it can do in society. But you can't ignore the harm that these technologies are doing. If they didn't do any harm, I wouldn't need to warn the rest of you or my future library patrons. So let's take a deeper look at the problem or problems and how, it's only going to be getting worse. This is where we tie things together. The introduction with fake news and disinformation, sowing distrust in news media, and the rise of machine learning models and algorithms that are manipulating the information we see online. Because you may think that a lack of trust would mean we are likely to scrutinize everything more closely, that people would check their sources, and that journalism would be held to higher standards than ever before. But instead, many people have retreated to echo chambers, whether they intended to or not, and they are rejecting anything that questions their worldview while trusting anything that supports them in turn. And social media algorithms are curating the content we see to shore up these silos, not dismantle them. These platforms want us to spend more time there to earn more advertising money, so they will continue showing us what we like in order to keep us liking, sharing, commenting, and scrolling. They do this by playing into our confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is defined as the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories. And now, I'm not a fan of reusing words from the base term in its definition. So I wrote out another version based on my own learning from this semester. Confirmation bias is a type of cognitive bias that results in seeking out information that we believe to be true while diminishing information that threatens what we believe. You can see a sort of image that illustrates this, because on the one side you have facts and evidence, and on the other side you have our beliefs. Now, that's not to say all of our beliefs are fictional or fantasy, it's just that they are present in our minds, not in the real world as data or information. And so that small place where they overlap is where we find the information that supports our beliefs, and therefore we are biased towards it and support it. Whereas everything outside of that overlapping space is the facts and evidence that threaten our beliefs, and therefore we tend to ignore it. It's really a funny habit that helps us stick to our previous conclusions, but comes to the detriment of facts that challenge it. And what this sort of does, when combined with this current technology and the trend of calling things fake news as a way to dismiss things that we don't like or agree with, means the simple act of getting news on current issues and events has become a divisive war of disinformation. And we are much more willing to shut out opposing views under the pretense of falsehood, while supporting the reports that we agree with, usually without doing any deeper examination of it. And this is how we spread information in the current day. But how did these ads and stories and carefully edited videos make their way onto our feeds instead of the unbiased facts? And that's by using psychometric profiles that I previously mentioned with Cambridge Analytica. They are not the only ones to use it. It is just that their particular situation and incident is the most high profile example. So these psychometric profiles that companies like Cambridge Analytica created were designed to help advertisements and political figures tweak their messages and their branding to be the most appealing to you as an individual. And once you fall for it, even one time, the platform algorithms will then subject you to even more targeted disinformation, ads, and even conspiracy theories. Yeah, even conspiracy theories. You wonder how people ended up in QAnon? They didn't start out believing the world governments were all in a secret baby-eating cult that they were deriving an elixir for eternal youth out of. That is not point A. They were lured in gradually. It's much easier to believe that article that insinuates that certain world leaders might be working together behind the scenes to manipulate certain events, especially large catastrophic events, for example, the COVID-19 pandemic. It's another one of those cognitive biases that we have, where the larger an event, the greater significance we attach to it, and this belief that it could not have happened purely by chance. There has to have been some sort of intent or plan or operation going on behind the scenes. So that is how our brains trick us into falling for these things. And then as soon as you buy in part way, it becomes a lot easier to convert you the rest of the way. That is historically true even in the older model of actual cults. So to dismiss these followers as ignorant fools is, in reality, a failure to recognize the very real risk those movements pose to any of us. These models will determine which conspiracies you are more likely to believe, even partially, and then use that to connect you to an echo chamber of like-minded people in no time at all. And that's how you ended up with people standing out in the streets holding posters and signs that say, "Save the children," and screaming about QAnon and how Trump was going to save them all in the country. But another thing that we need to consider is that perhaps the reason some people fall for these far-fetched conspiracy theories is because it's become so easy to fabricate supporting evidence that can be very convincing. This is where we have to look at synthetic media. And synthetic media is more commonly known, many of you will recognize the term, as deepfakes. So synthetic media, or deepfakes, refers to the artificial production, manipulation, and modification of data and media by automated means, especially through the use of artificial intelligence algorithms, such as for the purpose of misleading people or changing an original meaning. These have been on a massive rise since the creation of generative adversarial networks. And I'll go into that right after, but I just wanted to point out the first image I have. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not have, but in South Korea, there was a deepfake of a news anchor that was manipulated with AI that delivered some rather heinous news and seemingly current news updates. And it had many, many people in South Korea reacting very strongly to it. And when it came out later that it was all fake, most people fell for it. Even with such wild and ridiculous news titles and tidbits that was being shared by this AI, the video itself was so convincing that many of them couldn't even question it because it was coming from, a news anchor, what is supposed to be a trusted and reliable source. So how these deepfakes have gotten so good and how synthetic media has gotten so convincing is thanks to these generative adversarial networks. These are a type of machine learning model that pits two neural networks against each other. And you can see this image I have on the lower part of the slide. You can follow along with it as I explain. So one side generates synthetic media, that is the generator, while the other side attempts to discriminate between real and synthetic media. This creates a feedback loop that trains the generator to get better at creating synthetic media in an effort to fool the discriminator. And it's basically an incredibly fast, incredibly efficient process, working faster than humans ever could to get better and better at producing these deepfakes, essentially, and fake news stories. Then, to make it even worse, these models have then been able to be packaged in ways that make them incredibly accessible to even the average computer user. You don't need to have a degree in AI. You don't need to work in IT or have a computer science degree or be a fancy hacker to use these machine learning models, these AI. And now you can sort of see, again, it is scary, that the propagation of synthetic media is in the hands of millions of people. It's at their fingertips. And it's already happening. It's already out there. So at this point, the propagation of this synthetic media is impossible to monitor or contain. Pandora's box has already been opened, in a sense. So anyway, moving on to the final category, strategies, or what we can do right now. As a future librarian, I want to offer some methods that anyone can learn and apply in their life to better combat the spread of mis- and disinformation. Oh, it's getting so hot. So, the first strategy is to check your cognitive biases. You know what they say. The first step to fixing your problem is acknowledging you have one. We are not going to be able to always refute our cognitive biases, but we can try to work around them. And the first step to doing that is reflecting on what truths and beliefs we have and how those can affect how we perceive the information we come across. Next is to consider and challenge yourself by re-examining your beliefs on a regular basis and attempting to explain them in depth. Do you really know as much as you think you know about, these beliefs that you have? The third step is research. You need to be more open to research, especially from other perspectives and opposing perspectives that will force us to confront the views we have been holding on to for so long without question. And then we have to be open to updating our views in light of new research and information. The next tactic is learning data literacy. Developing the data literacy skill is imperative to fighting the battle against false information and manipulation. In his TED Talk, Why Everyone Should Be Data Literate, Jordan Morrow defines data literacy as the ability to read, work with, analyze, and argue with data. This isn't a field of study that you need to take classes in or be a computer expert to learn. It is all about asking questions, to never stop asking questions of the media and the information we consume. The point is to build confidence in our ability to handle data so that we can not only better understand it, but use it to make smart, informed decisions. I will be linking his TED Talk as well as all of the other resources I used for this presentation at the end of my slides and in the description of my video. The third method is things like the CRAP test. And yes, that is what most people say or call it, even though it does have an extra A. These are media evaluation methods that are acronyms. We don't have to invent new ways to evaluate the content we find online. There are plenty of resources out there, like the CRAP test, which was created by librarians at California State University. Now, CRAP is an acronym that stands for currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. It's used primarily for checking web resources to ensure they are reliable and trustworthy. These methods are not universal or standalone. You should utilize a combination of evaluation tools depending on the situation. Some other strategies that I've included on the slide include SIFT, radar, the 5 Ws, and CARS. Now, most of these do pertain to online strategies, so you may need to do some further research to find other methods and tools for different types of media, like journal scholarly articles and news stories, the newspaper, printed media like magazines, etc. But I find that all of these are incredibly helpful, and with enough practice, you may find yourself running through these methods instinctively every time you see a news article or piece of information claiming to be, breaking news come across your feed. The fourth method is online platform accountability. This is a less direct but still important way to fight the spread of false information online. One of the main reasons we see disinformation spread, even when it can result in harm to others, is because the high rate of engagement brings more profits to the websites that host the fake news stories. Even though policies on these platforms claim to forbid things like hate speech, violence, and criminal activity, they have no incentive to actually enforce those policies when letting it continue makes them more money. By pushing these companies, or even our government, to enforce their own terms of service and policies, this will be a major blow to the perpetuation and visibility of fake news. And once again, we return to the Cambridge Analytica and Facebook scandal. In 2019, the FTC dealt out its highest, strongest punishment in history to Facebook after they found that Facebook was deceiving users about how private and safe their data actually was. As part of this penalty, not only did Facebook have to pay an unprecedented penalty of $5 billion, but they also had to agree to an entirely new privacy structure in their company from the top down, all the way up to the board of directors, and as well as developing new tools for the FTC to monitor Facebook and other platforms to make sure that they're adhering to and upholding these sort of privacy compliance rules that they agree to when they operate in the United States. So if you check more current news here in 2022, you can see that even earlier this year, Congress was considering restricting companies like Facebook even further to protect our data and our privacy. As individuals and as American citizens, if you live in the United States, you should be pushing your representatives to pass these laws. Make sure that they know that you as a voter have a high priority and value placed in this issue. It's very important to you, and you want to elect representatives and support representatives that also prioritize these issues. The last tactic that I will go over in this presentation, although there are many, many more that I could do an entirely separate presentation on, is our own personal efforts to protect our data. And this might feel like a fruitless endeavor sometimes, but I encourage you to do your best to protect your personal data. Places like the European Union have laws that protect you already because they require companies to have the option for the average person to opt in to data collection. They are not allowed to collect or harvest most types of data, or really, I think, any types of data on the average person unless the user opts in. And that's not to say that all of you Europeans are safe. You still need to be very careful about the terms of services and privacy policies that you are casually agreeing to when you make a new social media account or when you join a new website. However, in the United States, there is the opposite. Private companies are given free rein to harvest most types of data without restriction until a user opts out of data collection. And I just want to stress again that technology has made it very easy for companies to take seemingly innocent data from us and then learn incredibly sensitive things about us. HIPAA may protect you from outside third parties finding out about your health conditions, medical decisions, medical history. But if you're Googling, where to buy Plan B or baby supplies, or even earlier than that, prenatal vitamins, it's very easy for these machine learning models to then figure out, oh, that person is pregnant because they Googled searching for these specific vitamins and they updated their period tracking app, and I can see that, they missed their period and their menstrual cycle is off. So with all of these different innocent looking data points, they are able to figure out that you are pregnant. And in fact, there was a pretty big news story a while back about how Target, yes, the shopping, the company with the red circles, Target, sent a targeted advertisement. That was an unintentional pun. They sent a very specific advertisement in the mail to a young girl who was a minor, and everything in that advertisement was baby and pregnancy products. Target knew that that girl was pregnant 2 weeks before she told her parents. That's honestly kind of frightening. So yeah, just goes to show, hey, people who menstruate, just real quick tip, don't use apps that track your menstrual cycle. Yeah, that data is not safe. Moving on. So again, the point of this strategy is to protect your data. So that means, unfortunately, in some cases, going through the tedious process of digging through the fine print of website policies and traversing the maze of buried page links to delete your data and forbid companies from accessing your data or selling it to third parties. And that's really the best we can do at present to organizations and companies that already have our data. So the rest of the examples on this slide are preventative measures that you can do going forward that take very little effort on your part, but can go a long way towards keeping you safe. Things like using a VPN or virtual private network, which hides your IP address and encrypts your browsing data. Extensions like ad blockers that modify your and also encrypt your identity and your browsing data from trackers and cookies that get launched at your computer every single time you visit any web page. I'm not kidding, any web page. And they pile on very quickly. So I do highly endorse the ad blockers specifically. I, in fact, hashtag not sponsored, use a few different extensions on my Firefox browser, such as the Privacy Badger. uBlock, I believe, is what it's called, although it uses the Greek letter mu. I have a DuckDuckGo extension, and even an extension that goes above and beyond some of these measures on social media platforms like Twitter to hide and protect my data even more than what's built into the website itself. So, and that kind of ties into my next point, which is to modify application permissions and privacy settings on these websites and in these applications and on your mobile devices to minimize access to things like your location data, your contacts, etc. If you can have your location data off at pretty much every moment that isn't absolutely necessary, like for your GPS, I highly encourage you to just always have that data turned off. It is terrifying to think that companies can know where I am at any given moment because they are allowed to just take that data from my phone without me knowing or consenting to that, especially as a female. So, another one is enabling two-factor authentication whenever possible. This helps secure any password-protected account that may have personal or sensitive information. And then, and using safer search engines. I already mentioned that I have an extension by DuckDuckGo, and that's because I'm still kind of hooked on using Google, but DuckDuckGo also is a search engine that does not collect, store, or sell your data. Importantly, in another discussion I had in a class, I don't remember if it was this one or another one, we found that Google does heavily manipulate and try to tailor search results based on what it thinks you want to see. It is quite biased, and it uses not only your previous searches and search history, but again, data it's collecting from you browsing other websites to try to show you and guide you to specific information that it thinks you want to see, and that also puts you in front of advertisements that give them more money. So using search engines like DuckDuckGo protects you from that implicit bias that the search engine is trying to work with. And if you're using all of these measures, and I'm not kidding, these overlap, but all that means is extra security. So do as many of these as you can. So this will make it a lot harder for companies to collect data on you, which means less targeted advertisements and less targeted misinformation. So here is some of the further learning that I'll get into while I give you my conclusion. This course was taken at the beginning of my Master's in Library and Information Sciences journey. It attempted to cover an incredible number of topics and sought to instill a greater understanding of the concepts that underpin the profession I am joining. By writing reflections throughout the semester, I formed a personal connection to the readings, activities, and discussions that comprised each module. This video pushed me to further consider which topics were most important to me currently, as well as what areas I consider important going forward, both in my education and future career. I pride myself on being a little more tech savvy than the average person, and even though I already knew some of what was covered in these modules, I was surprised at the shallowness of my understanding. I hope that by further reflecting on the role of technology in the spread of misinformation and fake news, I can help educate others to raise our community's overall level of awareness and be better informed. So here you can see the articles that I referenced, some of which were taken from my class readings, some of which I found in my research for this final project, and the same goes for all of these videos. I recommend every single one of these videos. I'm not kidding. I watched all of them, some of them multiple times, because again, some of these were assigned material for us to watch in not just this class, but another class that I took as well. And all of these are fantastic. And again, all of this will be linked in the description of my video. So thank you so much to both my professor who was watching this. I hope it didn't come across as too strange, and to any viewers who bothered to sit through this probably very long video even after my efforts to cut it down. I do appreciate anyone who took the time to watch this, and if you would like to leave any feedback, comments, or questions, go ahead and add them down below the video, and I will do my best to respond in a prompt manner. Though this being the end of my very first semester, I am feeling quite exhausted and burnt out. So who knows how quickly I'll get back to you. You can check me out on Twitter, YouTube, which is here, and TikTok, though I haven't been very active on there recently because of the final weeks leading up to the end of this semester. But I do hope to make some more content over the winter break. And of course, I have to give credit where credit is due. This slideshow template was created by SlidesGo and then imported into Google Slides. Well now, this scene should look a little more familiar to those of you who have watched my other videos on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed that presentation. It was a little strange, but when I first saw that for the final project, we were allowed to be quite creative in our deliverable for this project, I knew immediately that I wanted to try and make it a video if I could, so that I could share some of what I learned throughout this course with all of you in a way that didn't involve just, rambling in a vlog for 20, 30, 40 minutes. I am still going to be releasing a vlog, hopefully soon. I am sorry I did not release one for the month of November. Like I said, things were busy. But I will release one as a sort of wrap-up of my first semester, hopefully soon. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope that you are all reading things that are interesting, informative, or just plain good, old-fashioned escapism. And until next time, I hope you get to read something else that you enjoy.